Let's call a meeting. Let's begin with it's not on our agenda, but let's stand, have the pledge to the flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go ahead and have the roll call. We'll start with Planning Commission.
Bill Mann,
Here.
Tom Sauber,
Here.
Jim Bunker,
Here.
D.G. Garcia,
Here.
Charlie Jakes,
Present.
Dale Robbins,
Present.
Bill Boyer,
Here.
Gene Kuschel,
Here.
Troy Mullins.
Right, Citizen, don't say it wasn't really here.
Yeah, he asked to be excused. And now for Community Engagement Commission. Robin, you typically do roll call for Community Engagement Commission?
Yes, so I'll go to Commissioners Arlene Fisher-Mark,
Here.
Cynthia Gamboni,
Here.
Bill Norman,
Here.
Mark Saba.
Here.
And I'm asking that Aaron Asmuth and Summer Darrow be excused. When Summer comes in, I will note that for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, then, thanks to the Community Engagement Commission for joining us. As you guys know, with this comprehensive plan update, letting the community know what's going on is become a very important part of this. And so you guys are going to play a pretty darn important role in all of this. And so we appreciate your being here, appreciate the time and being willing to meet at a different time than normal. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. She's going to run us through the comprehensive plan, periodic update, and the draft community engagement plan.
So actually, I'm not going to be doing this. Lance is going to be leading us through this. Lance Mueller, our associate planner.
Okay.
This was his baby, developing this draft of the public engagement plan. I want to give you a context to it, however. So this draft is a working draft. We're very excited to have an outline to present to you. We're hoping that you can provide us with lots of feedback on things we may have missed, things you'd like to see added. And we want to talk a little bit about the roles for both Planning Commission and CEC in this process. As you all know, as you've all heard me talk about, the work program to undertake this comprehensive plan periodic update is pretty heavy lift. We have a lot of changes in the state regulations related to what we need to be doing with this. We've got some pretty big lifts as it relates to population and housing. We have some pretty big lifts in terms of what it's going to take to address land use. There is a climate planning element to it, recognizing that we do have changing climate, and we're going to be focusing on some of the resiliency things we need to do to protect ourselves from flooding, wildfire, those sorts of things that we need to do in terms of reducing vehicle miles traveled, which should be no problem for a community as dedicated to multimodal transportation as Liberty Lake. But we also have some pretty big lifts in terms of updating the parks plan, capital facilities plan. So we are likely to see our city built out in the next 20 years. So it's going to be really important for the first time that we really look at that capital facilities plan as our build out plan. We've got a lot of growth going on. We've got a lot of development. We've got a lot of housing units that are already in the pipeline, as it were. And we need to make sure that while there is still land available, that we can plan adequately for our parks, for our transportation infrastructure, particularly given the growth that is likely to transpire as based upon some of the changes that are being required by state law. And so I want to be clear on that we've got a lot of lifting to do. This public engagement plan is really critical to the whole process of public engagement. This should be our guide. This is not the be all and end all. It's intended to be a guide. We'll be adding to it and expanding upon it throughout the comprehensive planning process. And we have to recognize that there's a lot of different pieces that have different stakeholders, and we need to be sensitive to the topic areas and who's being impacted by those topic areas. Outreach to different stakeholder groups maybe needs to be nuanced and different. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities for engagement along the way. The other thing I have to say is that some of the changes that are being mandated by the state, we will be informing and educating rather than necessarily engaging and seeking input. There's some things we have to do with this, but the art of this comprehensive plan is to balance the mandates that are being imposed by the state in a way that we can also bring into it the community's vision for itself and try and balance the juxtaposition of those two things. And what that means is that for us to do that, we really have to be talking to our citizens. We really have to hear what their vision is. And you all are going to be critical in that process to really help us understand what the community's vision for itself is on all these different levels and all these different tiers. And yes, there may be some things that the community is not very happy about that the state is saying we must do, but we do have the art of this is going to be able to meet those mandates in a way that really also addresses our citizens' perception of what they want to see in the build out of their community. So it's a really exciting time. It's a great opportunity. And I think that done well, done right, this is going to be something that really builds community. We have a strong community now, and hopefully we'll have an even stronger community moving forward as a result of this process. In today's meeting, Lance is going to talk to you about the draft that we have proposed. He's also going to be really seeking your input. There'll be a point where we really want to talk to you about how you envision your involvement, both Planning Commission and Community Engagement Commission. As I said, because some of what we have to do is mandates, some of the content of the engagement is going to have to be staff driven or Planning Commission driven because that is their mandate. But the engagement piece and seeking people's opinions and figuring out how we can bring those into the policies, bring those into the vision for our community, how we implement that 20-year capital facilities plan, how we address transportation in a way that is responsive to all the different modes of transportation, including bicycles, Tom. So we're very excited that you're all here today and willing to help us paint this fence. You're all going to have an important role, and I hope that this is the beginning of just a really amazing process with our community. And so I will say that at the end of the process, one of the things that we will have to do, and this will be important, we have some ideas on how we document things along the way. But our draft public engagement plan, which is what we will be asking City Council to adopt as a draft, we will be adding to as we go along, and we have new ideas and we have new things that we need to push out there and get opinions and feedback on. We will also be providing documentation of the engagement throughout the next 2.5 years. So that it becomes an appendix to our comprehensive plan, and we can show how this was not some plan that was dreamed up in an ivory tower by a bunch of planners who don't know our community, that this is truly a community plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lance to share with you some of our thoughts on community engagement.
Thanks, Lisa. So So as Lisa kind of mentioned, I'm gonna give an overview of the draft here. Kind of go through it section by section. And at the end of each section, we can stop for a moment and have some discussion. And also, if there's anything you think of and you want to, ask a question in the middle of it, just raise your hand and we'll try to get to you. All right, so why are we doing this community engagement plan? We're doing it because the RCWs say we have to, but not only because of that. When we involve the community early and often in the planning process, they tend to have more buy-in and ownership of the finished plan. And so essentially we're planning with the community and not for them. And in that case, they're usually going to be better accepting of outcomes if they're involved in the creation of the plan. Next slide. So desired outcomes, this is what we'd like to achieve with this plan. We're going to increase and enhance public participation. And I take that to mean we'll have as much or more participation than we had the last time we did a comp plan update. We're going to foster community empowerment, which is the process of enabling communities to increase control of their lives. We're going to be transparent and inclusive. And part of that is going to be where we're going to seek out populations that have not often been included in the planning process. And finally, the comprehensive plan that we create is going to reflect the needs and aspirations of the residents and stakeholders. And we can't really do that without engaging them. I just want to pause here and ask anybody if there's anything else they'd like to add to this as far as what outcome we'd like to have from this public engagement plan.
I would like included face-to-face contact with community members, residents.
Okay.
Certainly not the whole population, but a random sampling, getting their input.
You can add that. Anything else?
Really, I think an important part of all this is how are we going to measure it? What are we using to measure enhanced public participation? How do we measure that? Community empowerment, how is that measured? I spent a lot of years in a business teaching people about setting goals. And one of the things that most people don't do is figure out ways to measure. And that I think is a really important part of this.
I think that's a really good point, and we certainly can dig into some of that. I think that one of the things, as a starting place, we want to ensure that we have more engagement than we had the last time around. And it was that they undertook a good effort to try and engage the public. We have more citizens now. I think some of the measures will be if we can reach those, and again, documenting who we're reaching, how we're reaching them, and measures include coming up with a variety of different ways to reach people. I think that the number of unique contacts that we make, I think ultimately a goal for ourselves should be to try and reach every single resident of the city of Liberty Lake. It's probably not a realistic goal, but it's certainly aspirational. And I would hope that we can touch every person in this city at some point in this process to get them engaged. They may not be willing to share, they may not even, but at least have the opportunity to do that. But I think that you're right. I think that one of the reasons why we document this, we'll create a public engagement record is so that we can go back and we can show how many people, what was effective, what wasn't, and we build on how we engage our community in the future. So I think I think that those are all things that we can do, but your point is well taken about the metrics.
Okay. Thank you.
Then next slide. That leads us into the goals of the plan. And so this is kind of a brief overview of the goals. They're in more detail in the plan if you want to go through that. But essentially, we're going to provide the public with opportunities to provide input. We're going to inform them of the mandates that we have from the state and the requirements that we need to achieve with the comprehensive plan. We're gonna help them feel confident in participating, and by saying that, we're gonna welcome them to these meetings and make them feel welcome, make them feel that they have the proper information to make comments at the meetings. We'd like to receive input from the community groups that have not historically been involved in the planning process. And we want to make sure our meetings are well attended. And as Lisa kind of has mentioned, if we can reach every single resident in the community. Are there any goals that anybody thinks are missing from this plan?
Question, the input received from community groups not involved historically.
Mhm.
What groups would those be that were not historically involved in the process?
Well, we're defining them now as vulnerable populations, and it can be communities that I think in our instance might be ones of lower income. So to specifically target those communities. And we'll talk about that in another slide if we want to get into it in greater
Okay.
detail, because it's going to be its own slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide. Okay, here's a list of the internal stakeholders that we've identified. Pretty straightforward: mayor and city council, planning commission, the community engagement commission, the Parks and Arts Commission, and city staff. And by that, we mean we'll be going around to the different departments of the city for specific elements of the comprehensive plan and trying to get input directly from them. Next slide. And then we've got our external stakeholders. And you'll see right at the top there is the residents of Liberty Lake and the business owners. A lot of the other stakeholders are public agencies. Some of these are directly from some other meetings we've had, either with the Planning Commission or the CEC. So we made sure to have as many of those that we've identified included in this list.
Lance,
Yeah.
I see you have developers listed. Does that include large landowners as well?
I suppose it could. I mean, if they're a landowner, they're also a resident. So I think they'd be included in that population for sure.
Don't you think also, LLPD should be on there?
So they're included as an internal stakeholder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That also includes Spokane Valley Fire Department.
Yes, Spokane Valley Fire District.
That's why I was questioning.
Yeah. It's because we contract with them, so we included them as external.
Developers are not necessarily individuals who live in the city. In fact, most of our developers do not live in Liberty Lake proper. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that
that's
because
true. That's
their
true.
presumption was that they are residents. That
Yeah.
is not.
If they're a large landowner, I can see us contacting them and asking for input in this plan.
But we don't want them to override the community's voice.
Sure.
Because again, most of them are not residents of Liberty Lake.
Sure.
And therefore, not that you made this chart as where we should start, but I prefer to see them at the bottom of the chart,
Sure.
the last ones that were asked, because most of the community engagement is going to talk about how we're building out, what we're building out, how fast, what projects. So just to clarify, only because I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's an easy change. We can totally do that.
Thank you.
Any other suggestions or comments?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking about also the residents who live fairly closer. My gosh. That we're right within the urban growth boundaries, and I'm thinking of the ones that like Alpine Shores, that live closer around that lake that really are a part of.
Yes, and I do think we're
It-
outside.
it-
Yeah,
it's
we
on
all
the
be.
outside, okay.
Yeah,
That's
they'll be
what-
included.
I'm sorry.
And we felt that was really important to include them because even if they don't live in our community,
Yeah.
they participate in our events. They frequent our businesses and they really do contribute to the overall sense of community that we have.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I see.
Next slide. So here's where we talk about the vulnerable populations. there's various definitions, but I think the one that's most applicable is populations that face adverse socioeconomic factors such as unemployment and high housing and transportation costs relative to their income. They've been categorized, various ways. You can do it through race, age-based, income-based, or gender-based. You'll note in the plan, we kind of call out income as being one that's, I think, easily identifiable for us and something that we can target through going to different apartment complexes or areas of town noted to have a lower income. So are there any populations here that we are not considering as vulnerable that we should be? Or is everybody comfortable kind of targeting based on income mostly? Okay. Yeah.
Comment on that. As I read that is this plan will focus on income level, but as we're leading up to this discussion, looking on Google here and median income in Liberty Lake as of 2022 is 101,936.
Exactly.
So if I may, I'm
The state is 91,306 and the federal level is 74,580. So is that the primary driving force of this?
So there is a state mandate that we address environmental justice and we address vulnerable populations. And there are some specific elements that we really have to give significant consideration to, and that those have to do with things like housing. It has the climate resiliency element. And I'll give you an example of this. In this particular case, age may be more of a vulnerability in with higher temperatures and whatnot. People on fixed incomes may well have air conditioning that they don't turn on and maybe more because they're trying to save on their fixed income and whatnot, and may actually be more vulnerable to the impact of increasing temperatures. That's just an example. So there are a variety of different vulnerabilities that will be looked at with different types of with different elements of the comp plan. Housing, definitely income is required. It's required for us to look at that. But again, I think there's also that environmental justice element.
I'm on the same page as Phil on that. And when you think of the community of Liberty Lake and vulnerable populations within the community, you might think about age as one that might be a bigger one relative to other categories. And the other thing you don't talk there was be individuals with disabilities.
I think that's a great point.
As old folks, we get trapped in our homes,
Yeah.
we need to get out and about.
Sure.
And just to piggyback on these two gentlemen, when I look at the comprehensive plan, I think we're looking at it in two separate ways. One that addresses what actually is currently happening here in Liberty Lake, and one that addresses what's happening in other parts of the world. And much of this does not happen here, as Phil talked about the income. So when we're looking at it, perhaps the general category should be age-related, because we can see clearly what's here in our community. We can see clearly that race in particular, we don't know in Liberty Lake. We don't know if race is going to be a big factor because we don't have a lot of people, other than a couple of us sitting at this table, that may be of a particular race, right? Different ethnicity. So that wouldn't be the biggest part that we should look at. We should look at that, but and not gear it on there, because oftentimes when we do that, and this is where I disagree with comprehensive plans, is when you do that and you structure it on, well, let's look at those ethnically challenged communities. we put that, we put them, those individuals in a negative position, right? We put them where people saying, oh, well, we're fixing the community to look like this so that it can draw certain aspects, but actually our community, and Lisa, educate me if I'm on the wrong track. When we do the comprehensive plan, we're pretty almost built out as far as housing, right? Not very many people are going to move in here unless we have multifamily housing.
Well, no, that's not exactly true.
Okay.
We have quite a few units that are in the pipeline. Yes, there is, when you look at all of the lots that have entitlement or areas that have entitlement through preliminary plats and through binding site plans, we have quite a few units in the pipeline. We get to count those towards our growth in population, but we don't know what that population will look like.
Right.
The other thing that I want to maybe take a pause for a second on why we're talking about vulnerable populations as part of this plan is because those are some of the populations that we need to make an extra effort to reach out to. So most of you who live in the River District are well aware of the mobile home subdivision on the south side. I dare say that I can't remember more than one or two folks from that area of the city coming to a city council meeting in the 6 years that I've been here. And I'm not sure how often we're engaging them or understanding even what needs they may have in their neighborhood. I think also too, we have, I think a total of 186 low-income housing units on the eastern boundary of the city. You may not have even known that we have those apartments. There are things that in our planning, have we thought about how have we engaged STA? And I can actually answer the question. I was in a meeting just last week with STA talking about exactly that, this area of the city that's not served by transit and what are the opportunities to have service. So it's looking at our comprehensive plan through the lens of what services are not provided to these communities that aren't really at the table. And one of the goals of our community engagement process with the comprehensive plan is making sure that we're reaching out to those communities and that we're getting input from them as well. That we're talking about the sidewalk that we need on the south side of Mission Avenue to serve that neighborhood, those sorts of things, and that those are being included in our capital facilities plan. So I think it's important for us to put a lens on when we talk about vulnerable populations, who are the people that are not at the table talking about their needs? Those are who we want to reach.
I understand that. If I may?
Yeah.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but that is not what I was saying.
I know, I was just trying to give a kind of a broader context to this
good, yeah.
discussion.
Because what I'm looking at is, when we look at a comprehensive plan, we should prepare regardless of what the race is. We should prepare for those who come in with less than the 100,000, which is the median income. We're a pretty nice middle-class community. We should prepare, I know states and federal, they always want to put out well, let's look at this and let's look at this so nobody feels upset about this. But what we do when we encourage communities to really build is that we build a community not based on our visible index, what we see as a visible index, but how do people live? What kind of jobs they have, service jobs. We're looking at the income that comes in. The race isn't doing the job, the individual is. So if we build a community based on finances, as Phil talks about, and as Jim talks about on age-related things, then we get further faster. This is just my personal opinion. When we start to talk about other things, then we have to look at, well, how do these people live? Well, how do these people live in these communities? When we talk about race, we're looking at how do they live? What do they want? What would be best for them? Instead of what's best for the whole, and not just for part of it, but for all of it. So frankly, that's where I concentrate on. The people in Talon, Broadway, Wig, and Talon Hills and Liberty, the forgotten people with over 159 children living in those apartments off of Apple Way that nobody even knows exists pretty much here in the community. They have very few people of any ethnic authority or capacity there. And so we should look at that because transportation doesn't go far enough. So those are the things. So I'm frankly, when I talk about this plan, I'm going to talk about less about how we can accommodate based on race and accommodate based on means and the level of means that we bring in each household and how they get there. Because we've got to mix the races, all of them in together to live in a community. But that's not going to be my first. If we can bring down some of the prices of some of these properties, we may be able to encourage more people to move in. They may look differently as that happens. But so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Thanks, DG. I think that back to the staff's point as to why we're including the vulnerable populations and income in specific. Phil gave us the overall view of the city of Liberty Lake. I live in the River District. Arlene will remember this because when the River District was built, how many homes were there over there? How many new homes were there? 0. I live in one of the first. All of that community are mobile homes and manufactured homes. And we had a discussion in here where somebody guffawed when I said that we have low income housing around here. Well, come over to the River District sometime and I'll show you, because I walked around and done door to door in these neighborhoods. And it's a huge amount of the police activity is over in that area as well. And that those people were aware of there being a comp plan in the first place. They were left completely out of having any voice in it. So I don't think we want to forget that in addition to the people that are living, whether they're in apartments or they're living on the east side of town. So I encourage us to continue having, there's a portion of our community that not everybody is aware of, and they certainly are not reached with this information. I think if we're going to educate any group of people on my side of the freeway, it's going to be, we're going to spend a lot of time around there. So I appreciate having that income as a factor here.
So I think also, not bad. I think also, when you look at the community and the public in general, however we start, and I like the public engagement plan, but one of the things is to do the whole, having them understand that, I mean, a recent situation happened at River District. So many of the people just didn't understand what the comp plan was, what growth management was, how did it all integrate together. And so I think that causes sometimes, if they don't quite understand how it works together, then not to be able to participate.
That's a really good point, and that is certainly, that's why we do have to have an education component as part of this outreach effort.
So then they understand much clearly on, oh, I understand this. And I mean, if you said Growth Management Act, I'm not sure, I understand it, but of course I'm well versed in it, but I'm not sure my next door neighbor. And to explain it to them, it would send them to sleep probably. So it's just, how do we get that to the people?
Are those 4 categories dictated by the state to us? Or is that something we chose? I would rather see that whole thing eliminated, that whole paragraph, just get rid of it. Because I think we are, the only things I submit to you that are really important is income and in disability. Particularly in our community. I get really uncomfortable when you start measuring things by race and age and gender. I think I would personally say, let's just eliminate that and don't even put that out there.
If I
Just
may-
my opinion.
If I may, that kind of tags in with, I forget who said it, but with Lisa, you said the goal was to maybe reach every citizen in the community. And if that's the goal, then you could eliminate this, but then how do we measure that we've actually reached all of them? So we'd have to come up with another way to make sure we went into the apartments over there. How do we know that we've checked that box and reached that population without?
Well, then I ask you, are people of certain races and ages and genders in our community being challenged? I asked the question. Yeah, I mean, I understand the point, but if we're gonna measure it, let's measure it by the entire community and not break it out by categories that the federal government says we cannot break it out into. Just an idea.
Again, these were examples of how these are categorized as a way to have a conversation about what generally we're discussing when we talk about vulnerable populations. We do recognize that it's going to be different in every community, and that's absolutely right. And income and age and disability are probably the biggest issues for our community. And I will say that age and disability are something that we really need to make sure that we're talking about and that we're accounting for in the planning that we do. Absolutely.
So you're gonna add disability.
Yes.
Well, yeah, we can add that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay, thank you.
For adding.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Gene?
Listening to the discussion, the thing that stands out in my mind in regards to these vulnerable populations is actual location. As you brought up there, Tom, those folks in the River District have probably a completely different ethnic breakdown, financial breakdown, than the folks that live in downtown Liberty Lake, if you want to call it that. So I'm submitting to the location.
Location, geography, kind of, yeah, okay.
Geography might be a better.
And if I may, this will be my last comment on this, I think. In the demographics for Liberty Lake, just to go through the population, let's just go through those persons of African American descent, Black, Negro, colored, whatever you want to call it. It's a 0.00 something, not even listed, not even registered. So how do you, if I may ask, which house do you find? I can't have everybody knocking on my home. I'm not home all day. But the key is, is that now, so if we have that, and I agree with wiping that out, putting age and income, because there's going to be a fight to say, oh, what we have in our community. And yes, we have, that person who says, yeah, my best friend is polka dots, right? And there's only one polka dot person in the community. So it's everybody's best friend. So when we remove that, and we just simply go by those things like, we could even go by education, right? Because education, we can measure. We measure the folks that we talk to. We measure who has a degree, what level of degree do they have in higher education. We can measure age. We can measure that through voting history. We can measure income, as Phil pointed out. Those are things we actually have that we can measure. If we had to measure it today, we have that. We can also measure through voting records, age. We can measure that every day. Those are things we can measure today. So if these are the things we can measure today, we have a better chance at getting the outcome that we're looking at and getting it in general terms that matches anyone and everyone from everywhere. As I said, there's over 150 odd children up the hill. And therefore, we might be able to measure that because we've got age, excuse me. But I totally agree. We need to move away from the things that really don't. Let's not let Washington dictate what matters here in Liberty Lake. But let's make sure Liberty Lake is measuring those things that are more important than anything else. And we can get to it quicker, faster, and it's pure, it's authentic.
Yeah.
That's all.
We'll definitely be looking at rewording that section then.
Thank you.
Next slide. Oh, sorry, one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Quite apart from identifying vulnerable populations, just in terms of understanding how successful or not we are at engaging the community. And in terms of understanding what we think we hear, I believe it is a pretty sound doctrine that the more you're able to know about your respondents, the fuller your understanding will be of the results of the conversation you're trying to generate. And that isn't limited to electronic communications at all. And the difficulty is just the resistance that we all have to repeatedly giving information about ourselves. So, but with that in mind, one of the things that we will struggle with going forward is how much can we learn about the people that we are talking to, and without diminishing the size of our respondent community. So again, apart from identifying vulnerable populations, knowing these things about the people who respond is helpful to us in understanding what the response is, I think. And I think if Aaron Asmus was here, he'd be patting me on the back for saying that.
Last question. As you go through the rest of this, there's any of this state mandated?
Yes.
Can you call out what that is? Because I'm not one to sit here and just take it without knowing the reasons behind it. When it comes to state mandate, I've said this many times over the years. Just because our state legislature seems to think it's good for everybody in the state, that doesn't, like DG just said, that doesn't mean it's good for our city. So we just like to understand which parts of these are us and not.
So I'm gonna say that is fair, and it probably is different depending upon the different elements that we're dealing with, and we're not getting into that level of detail with this public engagement plan. Suffice it to say that we are required to look at vulnerable populations. We're required to do tribal engagement and things like that. How we do that, how we tailor that to our community, I think there's a lot of latitude, and that's why this has been a good conversation, good feedback in terms of how we might approach our outreach. But I just want to again, have that general concept that the whole point is that we want to try and reach everybody, and we're going to have to make targeted efforts to reach those people that typically are not at the table. And that was really the point of this conversation. I'm going to we do have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to let Lance continue.
All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide here. So this is where we're talking about the actual outreach we're going to be doing. When I've been doing research, I've seen every community who's started comprehensive planning, their update. We create a website specific for the comp plan update. So our idea is to utilize the existing city website. Maybe you have a small page on there talking briefly about the comprehensive plan update, and then a link to a main site for the comp plan update. And that's going to utilize the Zen City platform. And we think that's going to be a great to help us with surveys. We could put on story maps, which I've got some examples I'll show you, but they're a great way to visually represent data. And any other kind of engagement we can kind of do on that main or the main comprehensive plan website. Actually, do you want to grab those samples? Yeah. So this is the city of Camas, Washington, and they created this storyboard, or I'm sorry, story map. And if you just scroll through it kind of slowly, you can see you're getting text, pictures. You can include maps. It's very interactive, and so we plan on utilizing this a lot for outreach. And you go to the first website. So the comp plan update websites, they look a lot different than your standard city website. So this is the city of Sammamish over on the west side. And we're looking at doing something quite similar to this. I just want to give you an example to see what it is we're kind of looking at doing. All right, you can go back. We're also going to be utilizing social media. We have the city has a Facebook account, so we'll be using that to update the public as far as what outreach events are occurring and where. Again, kind of bring up the different populations of the city. We're going to be targeting apartment complexes. This was brought up in another meeting we had, a discussion where a lot of apartment complexes, the large ones, they have meetings for the whole apartment complex once a month, once a quarter. We're going to contact them and see if we can be part of those meetings. We'll also target HOA boards to see if we can present to them. And the schools we have around here, if there's a career day or some kind of event where we can have a meeting with the kids there, we'd like to do that. And local service clubs such as Kiwanis. We'll also be going directly to community events. Some of these include the farmers market. We already have a booth there, so why not include some pamphlets about the comp plan update and have some staff there to answer questions. There's other events like movies in the park, the July 4th concert, Barefoot in the Park, and what I've seen other communities utilize is a Ask the Planner booth. So we'll be there, staff will be there, ask the planner, people come up, ask us about the comp plan, and we can explain to them, and we can also collect survey data at that point, at that time. We'll also have posters that we put up around the city properties, like the library and city hall here, and we'll utilize the city reader board. And one thing we can include on those is a QR code that's going to be comp plan specific. So when they take that a picture of that, it'll take them directly to the comp plan webpage. And then lastly, it's going to be one of the first things we're going to start doing here is we're going to have a kickoff meeting, a big event to get as many people excited about the comp plan update as possible. And is there any other kind of, if going through the plan, is there any other outreach activity ideas that people have that we'd like to add?
Can you put churches?
I think so. We could look at churches.
Under posters and city reader board, we utilize A-frames throughout the city also.
Okay.
Include some of the businesses too, especially restaurants and our food stores, the hub.
We're going to be hosting our first town hall meeting here in another, well, on the 10th of September, I believe. And we believe that that's going to be the first of what will be a series. And this would seem to be a logical and perhaps even recurring theme over the course of these next several months to invite, to make that a focus of the town hall. Of course, that would require the buy-in of the city council and mayor, but I would think there'd be a high degree of interest in doing that.
Sure.
And if we learn how to do it well.
So if I may, there will be a lot of very specific meetings, town hall meetings, group meetings about various elements of the comp plan throughout the next 2 years. And that is going to be, and we'll try and do different things, different ways. One of the things we learned during COVID or post-COVID when we were working on our network analysis was doing an open house that was hybrid, that is both a virtual and a physical location, really does work well for many people and whatnot. I do want to stress that there's going to have to be a lot of different types of meetings, targeted meetings, general meetings. Our kickoff meeting is going to probably be more of an education meeting about what the comp plan is and what the community's role in it is and whatnot. For many of these meetings, I would envision the typical, you'll have whether they're stations and boards and whatnot, we're going to need a lot of help with those. Typically, when we do those types of meetings, we may have some surveys, we may have some feedback forms, et cetera. We're going to need a lot of volunteers. We're hoping that both the Planning Commission and CEC will be our partners in doing that. We'll continue to work with both commissions in terms of how we can best engage. We're hoping that CEC can provide us with additional thoughts and approaches and strategies with each of the individual elements, because it is going to be kind of looking at different audiences, et cetera. So there are going to be lots of opportunities. One of the things we'd really love to hear from you is what you see. Planning Commission has a rule that's mandated that at the end of the day, everything has to go through them and be recommended before it goes to City Council. CEC, we'd like to really have a role as well throughout this process, and we'd like to hear how you'd like to be engaged in this comp plan process.
And apologize for being late here, and maybe this was covered in some way. Do we have a sort of tagline already? Like the one we saw was, how do you envision anything that isn't a comp plan is going to be an easier sell? So
Yeah, so that's kind of the last part of the meeting. We're going to be talking about that a little bit and what our next steps are. So a great point. Other thoughts?
I have 2 points. One is all of this engagement I see is staff going out. Your plates are pretty full. And I for one would be willing to go out as a commissioner if I had a planned presentation to do. I'm something of a ham anyway, and like public speaking. So if there are other commissioners that would like to do that, if we had a planned presentation that we could go, I would be more than happy to go to schools, whatever.
We would love to see that kind of engagement. We would love to see the commissions really yes, we are going to have to curate some of the content. There's no question about it. But we need all of you at the table to help us paint this fence if we're going to get it done and do it well. And I'm defining as really engaging our community and really being able to hold that input back into what the ultimate plan is.
The other thing I'll mention is I was taught long ago to get people involved. It's all related to an old radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? And all of this, we've got to base it to the community about what's in it for you. Why is this important to you? Well, how does this affect you? That's the total how we will get people involved. If once they understand that there's something in it for them, they will participate, but not until then.
Right. Well, one of the things that I will say that typically we're a little challenged to try and provide things like cookies and refreshments at events. One of the things we do have our planning update grant or periodic update grant from the state. And we can use some of those funds to purchase things like cookies, to encourage people to come out, and it just makes them feel a little more welcome at home. I don't think cookies is enough to actually bring people to a meeting, but it certainly sweetens the pot, as it were.
Well, and that gets to what do they care about? They care about taxes. They care about the cost of living. They care about the quality of life in this city. They care about how fast we're growing. They care about, is that growth being controlled? They care about traffic. Those are the things, that's what's in it for them, is to understand that we are attempting to manage all of that.
I think that's a really great point, and that is really the message we're going to have to get out there for this kickoff meeting, and then keep drumming on that as we find ways to tentacle out into the community.
Agreed. Okay, thank you.
Also quickly, I think, although those are the things that the people who are usually involved care about, I think as we reach out to those other people who aren't typically involved, the what's in it for me, they like the little things a lot of the time. So it's like street light, what kind of street lights, how very, very small, right in their face kind of stuff. So the more stuff that I see that we can present in all of these places that are, what kind of streetlights would you like to see? I think that type of stuff is easier for a broader engagement.
One of the things that I think helps a lot with engagement is whatever we do in terms of engagement, that we always have an open-ended question. What is the one thing that you would like to see happen in your city? And I think that empowers people to really kind of, we'll probably get way more information than we ever wanted to, but it's a great way to get people starting to think about, hey, maybe this one thing that I really care about can be part of my city.
So I know that the city's had several proposals of land use, and will you use any of that testimony to help you in this comp plan development?
Well, so I haven't heard anything unique in any of that testimony yet. And it is exactly the things that Commissioner Mann talked about. It is people want us to control the traffic. They want to know that we're going to maintain the character of their community. They want to know that we're planning for adequate parks. They want to know how this housing development is going to impact their quality of life.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we're going to be teeing up with this comp plan. So yeah, so those are absolutely the messages that we need to get out, that this is how you have a voice in your community.
Next.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As we talked about it today, and you mentioned service clubs, you mentioned Kiwanis, Rotary, well, other service clubs like veterans groups and senior centers
That's,
would also be two ideal locations, because those people are usually sponges information.
that is a very great point. And while we don't have our own senior center here, we can certainly find out, and I don't even know the answer to this. What senior center do people in Liberty Lake gravitate towards? Because there are some that are more regional. Do we?
Well, the one in Spokane Valley, people come from Idaho to participate. It's a very good.
The one at Marabou.
No.
Yeah.
That's good to know. And
Yeah. We'll make a note.
And those are the types of thinking outside the box questions that we have to ask ourselves. Where are our citizens at? Because we want to go and meet them there.
Okay, so when are we gonna do all this? I'd say right now, we'd already start working on the website, getting it ready. And you can see from this table, there's quite a few things listed in Q3 of 2024, which is coming up quite quickly. We're going to shortly be sending out a letter to the local tribes to see how they'd like to participate in this process. So that'll be checking off the tribal engagement box. We're also already maintaining an interested parties list. So anybody who contacts us saying they want to be updated on the status of the plan or any upcoming events, they'll be notified. We've got a kickoff meeting here that's going to be one of the first things we do, and we'd like to do that in September. So, I think what we could use from this group is, where do you think we should hold that? And maybe a time of day of the week, that'd help us out. Any ideas?
How many people?
Yeah, how many people are you planning? That's what you have to regulate everything around, because the biggest area we have right now is over at golf course, and that only holds 100.
Sure. And I think that'd probably be a good turnout, 100 people. So.
Then I would say the Rotary Room at Trailhead.
Okay.
And like Bill mentioned, the town hall transparency meeting, we were envisioning booths for all the commissions, and I feel like this would be a perfect opportunity for at least a poster board and some talking points.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, and that.
Yeah, because it's already in that space potentially, and with a large group of
And the date for that is again, September 10th.
10. Because
So,
to me, those two events really do go hand in hand, and it's the interested parties.
Well, and it actually would be a great way for us to promote the kickoff meeting that's totally focused on the comp plan, but we could have some beginning materials there. That's a great suggestion.
Plus,
Thanks, Bill.
the theme for that meeting is transparency, as Summer mentioned, so. Again, that it plays right into what we're trying to achieve. I think.
I think so too. That's exciting.
If we can go back just a bit, someone said something about a senior center. I look at that, that's the first thing I did when I got here, the first week I was here, I searched for a senior center for myself. So when it came, I was ready. But I think we should look at not only, talking about seniors, but, having a senior center. Look at these developers who are developing everywhere, to be able to help, build not only a senior center, but a teen center. Our teens are growing up right under our eyes, and now they're in the mischief-making centers. Because they have nothing at all to do other than skate park. So those are things in the comp plan that, just like you do, schools and a community.
So we are going to be looking at the master facilities plan for the city as we build out. We also need to be considering city facilities for the staff of the city. We've basically outgrown City Hall, as pretty much everybody knows. We can't hire enough staff because we don't have places for them to sit. The library is certainly moving, and there's opportunities for some of the space with PD. PD is growing rapidly. Public Works facility, yes, we've built that, but we're already at capacity for staffing there, and so we need to look at what we need for a full build out. We're also looking at a parks plan because we also recognize that when we build out this city, we want to plan for where park space needs to be and whatnot. So that whole city facilities plan is actually going to feed into, and we actually have it identified as an element. It's going to feed into that 20-year capital facilities plan. So those are great suggestions, and those are great things that we will want to hear about. And I've heard about the senior center since I got here. I think I got here just after it had failed the bond. The bond didn't get the 65% that it needed. It was only like 56 or 57%, something like that.
Senior center used to be here in this building.
Really?
That's correct, it was.
Good to know.
Amy, did you want to talk about that?
So just to complicate things just a little bit further, while we have this whole process going on, we're also going to have, thank you, Lisa. We're also going to have the climate element happening. So Lisa's kind of talked to each group about the state mandated climate element that we have to add to our comp plan, which has a greenhouse gas mitigation and a resiliency sub element. So that particular element has to be, it is state mandated that it has to be based on best available science. And there's a lot of technical data analysis that goes into that. So the participation on that plan has to be strategic and has to be kind of targeted in the beginning portion of it. Right now, our consultants are working on a specific community engagement plan for the climate element. And that will be similar to this, but it will be distinct because there's going to be different pieces and we're going to have the information at a later date. So it's just going to be separate for a little while. And then as we move through this timeline, you'll see it get integrated back into it. And then it will be integrated into the plan. And then it will be probably closer to like mid 2025, late 2025 is when we'll start seeing those pieces kind of come together, and then it'll just be one plan and it'll be one engagement. But in addition to it having the technical aspect of it and the science portion of it, it's also a new element. And so it has not received the same level of public input that the other elements have received. So it has to have kind of additional stuff going into it to make sure that it's getting the same public vetting that the other elements have already gotten. So you'll see that come out. We just wanted to make sure that nobody was confused about what we're doing, why we're doing this here and we're doing that over there. And eventually they'll come together. But we are going to have our first step in that engagement, once we get the plan kind of flushed out, is going to be forming a policy advisory committee. And so we'll be coming to this group, hopefully looking for people to kind of help us shape what that's going to look like. Because again, the policies have to be based on the science. And so there's a lot of conversations that have to go into that before we can even really start talking about what those policies are. So we just wanted to kind of give you guys the FYI that there's a separate process happening and kind of where it fits into the timeline that eventually you'll see it come back together.
And I'd just like to add to that, for Phil's purpose, that some of the things that are included in that public engagement plan are being prescribed by guidance from the Commerce Department. We do have a grant to cover that piece of it. There will still be engagement, and we'll still be wanting to engage all of you. And Planning Commission, it will still have to come back through you before it goes to City Council. So, but it's almost on a parallel track. I'm going to say also that there are several other elements that are going to, like the Parks Master Plan as an example. Parks and Arts Commission is going to be leading that. Again, it's similar but different stakeholders, and certainly this is going to be some guidance for them, but they may have very specific engagement process with that. In fact, I hope that they have a very specific engagement process with that. We will be hiring a consultant to assist them in that piece. Yes.
So that would be folded into this plan.
It will be folded into, it will actually become our Parks chapter, so it will have to come back to the Planning Commission for your blessing. And it will also feed into, there's a number of these that will feed into that 20-year capital facilities plan. That Parks plan will do that.
Well, just one other question. Looking at the Gantt chart, there's 8 quarters of work on that Gantt chart, beginning with stakeholders. So there's 24 stakeholders, and you've got 11 elements you've got to get done in a period of time. Have you developed any kind of like a critical path chart to show you when these elements will start falling out of this process for review?
The challenge is the very first piece of it is the piece that deals with the housing allocation that is caught up in the for those of you who have heard me talk before, we have the steering committee of elected officials which drive that, and a planning technical advisory committee. That ultimately the Board of County Commissioners has to adopt that. But it's recommended to them by this steering committee of elected officials, which our mayor is on. We are on the planning technical advisory committee. We are mired down and we're ahead of most other agencies within the 2026 timeframe. The Spokane County is, but we are mired down right now and trying to work through the methodology of that. And we are hoping that we are targeting to have that adopted by the end of 2024. And there's some really technical land capacity analysis that needs to be done as part of that. We can't even complete that work until we have that allocation method and we know what the housing types are. We are working on our piece of that analysis and we'll then plug in the information that we have. That's going to drive the housing chapter. It's going to drive the land use chapter. It's going to drive the network analysis. It's going to drive so much of the plan. The Parks plan, we are planning on going out for a consultant in the fourth quarter of 2024 to have them on board and have that contract awarded so that the Parks Commission can begin that work in 2025 and hopefully have it wrapped up by the end of 2025. We do have kind of a timeline. We have in fact, I've shared that work program with you. Honestly, I have to update it, but I can't update it until we know the critical path. The critical path right now is this piece that is outside of our control. So the rest of it is like, we're going to be jammed to try and make this happen. And one of the things that I will say, and that you raise another good point in terms of how much engagement has to happen here. we're gonna have to work really hard and be very targeted to avoid stakeholder burnout. Because we are going to have a lot of community engagement going on, and which is part of the reason why we need all of you to help us paint this fence.
One of the things I've seen in this process, in prior examples that I've been involved in, is that the planning department doesn't adequately define for the stakeholders their scope of involvement. And what happens is you start these meetings and these discussions, and it's almost like, you know, it's, be careful what you ask for, you might get it, type of deal. You need to really define, if you're gonna meet with it, like the Chamber of Commerce, for example, you need to define what the scope of the discussion is, why we're meeting, and what the limits to that scope will be. Otherwise, 2028 will be here, and you'll still be waiting to get the plan done.
I understand, and we are, you're absolutely right. That is the challenge. And what we're trying to do right now with this particular public engagement plan is develop a good guideline for how we're going to approach it, because it's going to be a little bit different with each of the elements. And some of the elements are just, are going to be, are a lighter lift, frankly, than others. And so we know what the heavy lifts are going to be. And those are the ones that we think that they're probably the most critical path for this. There are other pieces that people will really enjoy engaging in. Some people will. Our cultural and historic chapter. There are folks that are very engaged in this. That's
Fun stuff.
right, the fun stuff. And I think the parks plan is going to be the fun stuff also. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we have other people to paint that fence. So, but again, this is for myself. I really enjoy a good chess game. And so this is going to be a good chess game, and I hope you're all good chess players.
Next slide. So the next thing we need to start working on here is creating the brand for the comp plan. In order to do that, we're going to need to create a logo, generally with a slogan involved, come up with a color scheme, a font that we're going to use throughout all of the documents in the comp plan and the outreach materials, and a QR code. And so I just want to include some examples of what we did in the past. Our last comp plan, the slogan was preserving our past and preparing for our future. And then City of Spokane, another local one, just went with shaping Spokane. So something small and simple. Do you want to go to the next page? And then here's just some research I've done where this is what helps to create a good brand. You create an emotional connection, identify a target audience, or it's geared towards a specific audience. It conveys a message, and it's easy to remember. I think probably everybody's heard of Got Milk or Nike's Just Do It. Something short and simple. Yeah. It's funny you bring that up because Lisa said that this morning.
We're dating ourselves.
Next slide. So here's some examples of communities on the west side who they started a few years before us because their plan's supposed to be finished, I think, by the end of this year. So you've got our Vancouver, Snoqualmie Planning Our Future, Envision Sammamish, and our Camas, hometown, our town. So all reasonably small, all using just a few colors, a very recognizable logo. So we're going to need to come up with something like that. In order to do that, it tends to be a lot of discussion involved. So we're thinking a smaller group would be good. So I was thinking if we could make a subcommittee from two of these groups, 3 from each commission, we could work more in depth on creating this logo and slogan. So we'll be looking for volunteers for that. Is there anybody right now who just would want to participate? Okay. We'll
So let me get names.
Yeah.
Kathy, write down the names, please. Summer Darrow, Tom Solberg,
Arlene Fisher.
Joe Mann, Robin Bechtel, Arlene Fisher, and Cynthia Gamboni. Did I get everybody? Did you get everybody?
Okay, great, thank you. Next slide. Okay, that brings us here to the end. So what are our next steps? So we're gonna go ahead and make some changes to the plan based on all the feedback we've received today. And then it will need to go to the planning commission. The planning commission will need to make a recommendation to council. And we're hoping to have that ready for your September meeting.
And again, this is one of the things that we're going to get reimbursed for with our grant. This is going to, we're only asking them to adopt it as a draft plan because we recognize that it's going to evolve through the course of the process as we get into the specific elements and whatnot. And we will continue to add to it and provide the documentation, and it will become an appendix to our comprehensive plan when we're ready to adopt it. And that's, and that will be the proof of our engagement. I hope that at the end of this, we have a debrief and we learn what went well and what didn't go well and what we do for the next round.
Lance, would you make sure that the PowerPoint, and if we do presentations or joint work, goes to everybody that's here on both sides? If it's just for the planning commission, then it would go to us, but in this case, for all of this that has to do with the engagement, everybody, just like the city council asked for last night.
Yep. Yeah.
And again, apologies if I missed this at the beginning, but your last talk, you showed the different regions and where they were at timeframe wise. Obviously, you're connecting with people in those different regions. Do we have community engagement connections that we could make, people who are working on this same thing in the different regions, someone you would point to, or different groups?
So Lance did the research. I'm going to.
Well, yeah. So I have, in order to make this plan, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I did look at a lot of different communities, and unfortunately, their plans are all very generic and much shorter than ours. Ours, I think, is very comprehensive in what it covers. So I could reach out to them and see some, what worked for you guys, what didn't, and I could include that.
Yeah, specifically in community engagement. I guess I'm just kind of curious what people were doing there. The other things are, perhaps more tailored specifically. The climate part, I'm also interested. Obviously, there would be different regional requirements based on climates, but that's also kind of interesting to me what a community engagement version of that looked like in the past.
Surprisingly, there's not differences in what's required.
Interesting. Okay, well, that alone is an interesting science.
You just said something that I wanted to piggyback on. Oh my goodness. But we will get back to you on it. One of the things I will say is that one of the challenges that Lance had with this, because we really wanted this to be guidance for all of us. And again, we want it to be a living document. We are going to grow with this document, and we're going to, as we go through the process. But one of the challenges is that this is something that is mandated. It's one of the items on our comp plan checklist. But very many people just treat it as that, check the box. And actually, I think that we looked at the City of Liberty Lakes last engagement plan, and I was embarrassed. It was that skinny, it was that. So that was disappointing, and it's disappointing to see that others are kind of treating it as a check the box. We took a different approach. We want this to guide what we're doing because we are very committed to the engagement piece of this process. And that's going to be and as I started this meeting off, I'm going to end it with the fact that that's what needs to happen if we really want this to be a meaningful plan for our community. And it's not just worth doing, it's worth doing well.
So if I may, I have one final thought to that, and you have to go to them. If you think for 1 minute your community is going to come in here and sit in those chairs and, do this, it just isn't going to work. You talk about raising golf balls, doing things like that, you're going to have a packed house. You talk about raising water or your utility rates, you're going to have a packed house. But this stuff is boring. Sorry. It's, I mean, that's the truth. Well, I mean, I know, I've been through 4 of them, so I know. And they are important. And if it is not done right, and if there is not an element that is not done right, the state will send it right back to you. I've had 2 sent back to me and said, you know what? You only had 4 city outings, you need to have 6. Okay. You know, I think if you talk about places where we could have been, we had National Night Out, which, you know, was yesterday. That would have been an excellent place or another opportunity, maybe next fall, to address things like this. And I will say one last thing. I will say that the city booth gets action. I'm at the Rotary booth right next door. And you know this, Mark. You guys are busy, and I am actually so impressed about how many folks filter through that. And so that is an excellent resource. Use it, really use it.
And that's why we brought it up in this plan. We know that that's going to be a key element, but it's not going to reach everybody. It's not, and we're going to have to really work hard. We are going to have to walk the neighborhood. In fact, I mentioned that, I mentioned that this morning when I was talking to my staff, that that's how you have to do it. That's how you have to do it. And and I hope that we have a team of volunteers that will help us paint that fence. And I think it's an exciting opportunity. So I stole your thunder.
That's okay.
The last thing that we really wanted to ask you is, what did we miss in this plan? Is there something else that hasn't been covered by the other comments that we just really dropped the ball on?
The youth. So we need to have, in addition to all these fine folks in our communities, we need to engage a group of youth, teenagers. They know where their friends are, where they live. They can lead us to that age dynamic. We shouldn't shy away from using them. I don't think we are, but I think we should have at least, I would say, a minimum out of 12 students, male, female, or whatever they describe themselves as being, on that portion of knocking on doors. You can't knock on a door and find the young person who answers and then say nothing to them. Because mom's on the side and you say, you're going to talk about this, but mom's going to tell you about her kid without having the children there. There's a relationship. They are the next leaders for Liberty Lake. So I would say a recommendation would be to solicit amongst us, we have grandchildren of age or whatever, to be a part of this.
I think that's a great suggestion. We do want to reach out to the schools. We will be at the school fairs, et cetera. We want to actually reach out to the high school and possibly even the junior high to see about connecting with some classes. It's going to be super critical, particularly for the climate resiliency element, because and I know this from back in the day when I was a garbage geek and I started a curbside recycling program. It was the kids that educated the parents. The kids and the seniors, because the seniors remembered it from World War II, and the kids who were excited about saving their planet. Now, again, I know how that all turned out 30 years later, but at the time.
Lisa?
Yes.
But I may have asked you about this one time before. I don't see a fiscal element here. Is that included in the economic section?
So there is a brief chapter on economic development that, and we're really gonna, I've actually asked Mark to lead that one up and engage the partners, because it's a really skinny section and we don't really do economic development. We contract with partners to do that. We do, our brand of economic development is we make it easy to do business in the city. Having said that, the fiscal, it has to, our fiscally, when we talk about the 20-year capital facilities plan, that will be looking at fiscal constraint. So that is a piece of that element. I think the other thing is that we as a city are looking at that in terms of what happens as we get built out. And that those are conversations that are happening with, and will continue to happen with council going forward. What does that look like? And what is when we see a serious reduction in, it's not so much building permits, but it has to do more with the sales tax that we get from construction materials, and it has a lot to do with REIT, which is how we do a lot of our capital facilities. And so that's going to be embedded in that conversation. So, and yeah, it will be fiscally constrained. It will be a fiscally constrained comp plan. Keep in mind that most of the development that occurs is going to be developer driven, other than that capital facilities plan. So.
If I may, I only plan to be here for about an hour and a half and I don't know protocol, but may I ask to be excused? My kids are in jujitsu and they're gonna get out really soon.
Well, and actually that is a great segue because, okay.
Just run away.
It wasn't a question, it was more of a comment leading off of what DG said about youth. And this is something totally different, but pre-COVID, we had a youth commission. I think it's viable for us to bring that back in order, and it would fall right within this same realm here. Just a thought.
I will bring that up to our leadership.
Oh, thank you.
I gotta make one comment, like for the record, Senator Darrow came in about 4:25.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
I excused you and I said I would.
Did you get that? 425, someone came in.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we did know you were going to
Yeah.
play.
Thank you.
Well, you know, if you would, the Community Engagement Commission, if you'd like to stay with us, we'll double your pay.
I can't afford that.
But if you would like to adjourn, we had planned this to go till 5:30. If you'd like to make a motion for adjournment, the Planning Commission has a little bit of business that will probably take us 10 to 15 minutes at the most.
Thank you guys for being here and sharing.
All right.
Second.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming. I hope that we have many more productive meetings like this. It's been a real pleasure, just having the opportunity to work with you.
Yes, I know. It is good, isn't it?
It is.
Nice meeting you.
Sorry. We're on.
2020.
Thank you.
Some of you guys,
Well done, by I mean, that's how you have to do it. You have to, you forget the power. And there'll be a day when you actually. Yes. I mean, I find that you're enjoying what you're doing. All so much, and it's really on you guys how long this meeting takes. I think this is relatively quick. I figured we could slap the minutes on there since they were relevant to the ratification anyhow. And so we just have a couple items of business, the approval of minutes and the ratification of the findings and recommendations.
do we have any citizens online for comments?
Oh, thank you for.
Just want to make sure. No, okay, thank you. Commissioner comments or reports, any commissioners? Okay, thank you. None, seeing none. Community Engagement Commission's gone. By the way, there was a lot of work on that plan. Thank you. That obviously a lot of work went into that. I appreciate it. Okay, we get our general business approval of the minutes from July the 10th. Anybody have any additions or changes to the minutes from July?
Move to approve. Second?
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the next is ratification of our findings, conclusions, and recommendations on the proposed lighting code amendments.
May I make one point? What is in? your
Yes, ma'am.
packet? There is a typo on page, I believe it's page 5 of the findings and conclusions. In the staff analysis, the error is that it talks about, it's page 4, I'm sorry, at the bottom. That the permitted hours of operations have been expanded from 11 PM to 12:30 PM. That should be AM.
AM, yeah.
And I've already corrected it, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a typo in there.
As you said. Move to approve approve the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the proposed lighting code amendments.
Do we need to read those again? The conclusions?
It's
No.
up to you all.
Did anybody need them read?
Second.
There's a motion seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We will move on to the ratification of findings, conclusions, and recommendations for the proposed amendment for fueling stations as an accessory use.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Secretary's report.
So I just wanted to quickly say that we will be in September bringing back revisions to the draft public engagement plan is based upon this meeting, and we're hoping that you will, after reviewing it, you'll make any changes you feel need to be made, and we can forward it on to city council. Again, we're only asking them to approve it as a draft, and that it should be a living document. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is that in September, I don't think we're gonna have the HAPT thing resolved to really talk about the housing allocation yet with PTAC. It's a painful conversation that we're having, honestly. But we'll get there. But in the meantime, I would like to workshop with you the changes we need to make for the emergency housing amendments that we did back in 2021, because there are some changes that we need to make. I mentioned this early on. There's some changes that we need to make so that we don't have to do a land capacity analysis specific to the emergency shelters, because I can tell you right now that it won't be adequate if we do it, and we need to just change those regulations as it relates to the separation distances and capacity issues, and limit it only to capacity as per building code. So those are changes that we have to make. Again, it's not like it's going to it's likely that it's going to happen here because our land is too valuable. It's going to be market driven if that happens. I don't think that it will, but I do believe that we have no choice but to change it. If we don't change it now, we'll go through the painful mathematical exercise of demonstrating that it doesn't work, and then still have to change it.
That makes sense.
So those were the two items that I'm aware to bring forward to the agenda, if that's acceptable to all of you. And that's all I had.
Anything else for the good of the order? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious, has Frontera Acquisitions LLC applied for a permit in the city of Liberty Lake yet?
Have they applied for a permit yet? No, they have not. We actually are expecting the SEPA to come in on a binding site plan first for that property. And they're going to be moving forward with the binding site plan first. The only reason I know this is because we've had several reviews of the trip generation and distribution letter that has to come in with the SEPA, and had required some revisions. I think that's probably the thing they're waiting on. I think they're going to start with the SEPA, and it's an amendment to the 21st amendment to binding site plan 9650, to break up that last parcel. And they want to do that. They're gonna actually, my understanding is that they're gonna do that first to address the traffic concurrency issues, because that piece right now has no vested trips. And so they're gonna have to go through we've been talking to WashDOT, we've been talking to Spokane Valley to make certain that that's gonna be a critical path of their due diligence, and they're not gonna buy the property until they know they can
It's
do
a
that.
big
So
issue.
it is a big issue. It is, and this is why, this is the kind of the frustrating thing, the inaccurate information that's out there in the media. It's not that it's a given, it's that they're kicking the tires, people. They're kicking the tires. They haven't, and so anyhow, so that was, my husband told me that was insider baseball.
Thank you. Lisa, do you know what's going on with the flooring company? That building, they've stopped construction on it in the far east part of the city?
No, it's still under construction. They're doing some work on the inside, and they
Oh, okay.
they're trying to deal with some of the access issues, and they ran into a problem because the purchase and sale agreement required them to have a separate entrance, even though the short plat that was done back in 2015 or 16 actually gave them access through the existing cannabis and glass driveway. So when they sold the property, they said, oh, by the way, you have to have your own access entrance. So, yeah, so that is the reason why that entrance, they have it's quite and it's really they still have access across the other driveway. So that's how everybody's going to access it. But
Okay, just curious on my part.
yeah, so but that's been a challenge for them, for sure.
Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Next meeting will be the 11th of September.
That's correct.
Yeah, I hear a motion for an adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Motion seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're done. Thank you.